Kia, and welcome back to In Her Words. I am your host, Tando Mazavulo. And today, like every other time, we have an amazing guest. She is an author who's written 22 books, a copywriter, a ghostwriter, and she also helps upcoming writers. Welcome, Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? So,
I'm
Jessica,
great.
please explain to us how you wrote so many books.
Oh, well, that's just what I like to do. I've always loved to write like ever since I can remember. Really, that's been what I've enjoyed the most. And when I got in college, that's when I really started taking it seriously, though, as far as writing with the intent to publish. So, um, just whatever free time I had, that's what I was doing. So that's over time you build up a lot.
Okay, so you studied sports management. You mentioned you went to college, and yes, you did have a passion for writing, but how do you now pivot from sports management or studying sports management in college to going into being an author?
Oh, you know what? I've been all over the place. And that's really just not taking time when I was younger to really sit and think about what I wanted to do long term. It was more what I liked in the moment back then. um, I graduated high school, went to college school. Then I went to college and studied sports management. Then I went to massage therapy school, and then I worked in telecommunications for 14 years. So, I've been doing some everything, and I could have avoided all of that if I had like taken the time when I was, you know, a teenager to really think about, okay, what do I want to make my living at? What do I want? What do I really love to do? And what do I want as a career rather than, okay, I like this, I'll study this, and then do it for a while and then move on to something else. So that was really just poor planning on my part. I liked all of that stuff, but those weren't my passions, like writing is.
So then what was the turning point that made you, after changing careers and things that you thought were stuff you liked to be a career, what was the turning point that made you realize that I actually want to be an author?
Well, I wanted to be an author forever. Like that never went anywhere. It was just a matter of me not knowing, I guess, how to go about it. Back in the day, excuse me, I specifically remember one of my life goals being I want to be a bestseller. But I was writing books, back then. But I didn't know how to go about getting them published or who to give them to or whatever. Because unfortunately, also over the years, I've run into a lot of people who said they would help me do things and didn't. So I had developed a kind of trust issue with people not believing what they were going to say, or when they said, oh yeah, I help you, I know what to do, I can hook you up, or I can refer you to this, but and none of that ever happened. So it wasn't until it was 2008 when I published my first book, and a family friend, he helped me to go about that. Um, and it was a few years before that I tried to go the traditional route and submitted another book, and they actually wanted to buy it, but the terms were awful. And I showed the contract to that same family friend who's an attorney, and he was like, "Yeah, no, you don't want to do that. They'll take everything from you with this." Um, so yeah, and I didn't, and self-publishing wasn't as big a thing back then. Um, so yeah, 2008 was when everything kicked off.
You speak about self-publishing and it not being such a big thing back in 2008. And yes, publishers not responding to you well or just wanting to take everything from you. What led to you to decide, okay, I will self-publish, and how did you come to that decision?
Well, when he the avenue that he introduced me to, at the time, I didn't even realize what self-publishing. I didn't. It wasn't necessarily the term that was used. But over time, it became more and more popular, and I realized that that's actually what I was doing after the fact. But even though I knew that, with the terms that were laid out, I still owned all my rights, and I could take the book somewhere else if I wanted to. I knew all of that, but I still, the term self-publishing just wasn't, used at the time. So, but once I, got wind of it and learned what it was, it didn't change anything. I was very, very happy with that, because I liked that I still had all of that control, and I was still able to own everything that I put out, and I didn't have to defer to anyone else as far as my content, or as far as when I put the books out, or as far as, cover design, or any of those little things that, in any other sense, I would have to kind of get approval from other people about, something I created, and I didn't want to have to do that.
Self-publishing is a big journey, and it's a journey that can be quite expensive. So when you started, how hard was it financially for you to now publish your own books, or did you get help in that regard?
Well, for my first book, I think he helped me some, because he knew at the time my situation. I mean, I was working, but I wasn't in a position to fund all of that on my own. And it wasn't ridiculously expensive, but it was just more than I was prepared to do at the time. So he helped me with the first one. But everyone, thereafter, I did myself. And, like I said, it wasn't, I mean, it's not free or cheap or anything, but it's not, ridiculously expensive. So after that, I would do put out one book a year or every other year, depending on my situation. Up until recently, when I changed avenues. Now you have companies like Draft Digital, which I now use, which allows you to be a little more flexible, or at least you can put out more things more often, just because of how it's done. So yeah, over the years I've kind of learned how to be more cost efficient with that, and it's not as bad now. I mean, you still need to spend money, but it's not as bad as a lot of people might think it is as far as that.
Okay. So for a reader who's not familiar with some of your books, what would you categorize yourself as? What type of author, what genre do you write of the books that you write?
Most of my books are more women's fiction. I do have some romance, and a few of them are a little on the heavy side. As far as genre, I would say, I guess mainstream or something like that. It's funny. When I was actually categorizing them a little while back, there were a couple of them I was beating my head against the wall trying to figure out what genre they were, and you would think I would know that, considering I wrote it, but I don't have that in mind when I'm writing a story. It's just the story I want to write, and then after the fact, I worry about all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I try to most amount of women's fiction. There's a lot of romance in all of them, but in those particular stories, it's not about the romance centrally. It's about the woman protagonist, or in a couple of them, it's the relationship between two friends, or whatever. But yeah, I think only 3 or 4 of them are technically romance by definition. But yeah, that's for the most part out of all of them.
You also are consulting young writers, or moving into that space of helping young writers to write. What made you have step into that decision of being someone who helps young talents or creative talents in writing?
Well, people kept asking me. It wasn't anything I said I wanted to do and set out to do. It was a thing of people would come to me and be like, "Hey, I got this book idea, and I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to get started," or that's what it was. It wasn't a particular desire of mine to go into that. I don't mind doing it, but it's certainly not my main thing, or anything that I really even advertise. It's on my website, but I don't make that known as a thing that I do, because that takes a lot of time. Yeah. And I would rather spend most of my time working on my books. Now, if someone were to seriously come up to me and say, "I need your help," then absolutely. But it's mostly a thing of, if you happen to know I do that, and and you come and ask, and we vibe like that, then yes, then I'll absolutely help you. But yeah, it's more of a side thing that, just kind of bore out of necessity. That people kept asking if I could help them with that, and that's fine. I don't mind doing that.
You spoke about that you write stories about women and women protagonists. Was it very intentional for you that your giftings or your offerings were about women's stories?
I wouldn't say that. The only thing that's really intentional is that my characters are Black. Other than that, whatever the story is, that's just what the story is. Most of my books center around women, but I do have, I'm looking at my books now, I do have, I think, one or two that have male protagonists, mm-hmm. And it's from their point of view. But for the most part, yeah, but that's just how, or it's a dual POV, it's male and the man and the woman. But yeah, that's just how it goes, and I guess it's just, I guess being a woman myself, that's just the point of view I lean towards. But yeah, no, it's not a conscious decision.
So I know, like, an author's books are their babies. Yeah. But which one is your favorite baby? Do you have a favorite baby?
Oh goodness. Let's see. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Just one, right?
Just one. Let me rephrase the question. Like, if someone came to you and said, "Which is the first book of yours should I start reading?" Which one would you recommend? The first book, not necessarily the first one that you publish, but which one?
Right. I would probably say Forehead Kiss, which I released last year. That's Friends to Lovers rom-com. That's definitely at the top of the list. If it's not the favorite, it's right up there. That was just one that I wrote that at the time I needed to write something funny and lighthearted and something that would lift my spirits as well as anyone else's. So yeah, that's one I actually, and it's funny, people don't believe authors do this, but we actually enjoy reading our own stuff. So when I pick up the book sometimes now, still, I flip through it and I still chuckle at it. And, even though I wrote it, I know everything's still happen. I still, enjoy reading through it, because it and I hope that it has that same effect on other people. It's just a fun, funny, lighthearted, book. And so, I would say that one, if I had to recommend one.
Forehead Kiss is the one to
Forehead Kiss, yes.
To start with.
Right. Start with. Read that one, then read all the other ones.
Read the other ones. You spoke about some of the topics that you do cover, are heavy, and I saw that there are some heavy books that talk about domestic violence and sexual violence. Was that something that was important for you to also highlight, besides the light-hearted, stories? And why go down that route? Because some people just, write happy stories and that's enough for them in their career.
Right. I don't have an agenda. So it's like, whenever I think of a story, it's really just the story that comes to my mind, and that's really it. It's no conscious thing of I want to highlight whatever. I really, if anyone, if anyone that knows me knows, I don't even like to watch the news because it's just so, it's so much heaviness and darkness and stuff. I don't like violent movies. I don't like, any of that stuff. So, it's really when the story comes to my mind and it won't leave, then I know that's something I need to write. My books like Emasculated, which is heavy on, which centers on a man being abused by his girlfriend. Um, I thought of that how many other years ago, and I mean, I didn't really think anything beyond, that was the story that I wanted to write at the time. Um, Back Talk, which is another one. The Beginning of Again, that's another heavy one. Those are just, they came to my mind and they developed how they developed, and I always allow the stories to develop however they're going to develop on the page. Um, Sometimes it's as I imagine it. Sometimes it's not. Um, but it kind of goes its own way as I'm writing it, and I just go with it. But yeah, I never have a conscious decision up front about I want to write a story about domestic violence, or I want to write a story about child abuse, whatever. That's not how it goes with me. It's just whatever, however the story appears in my mind. That's how I write it. You know. But those stories also take a lot out of you when you're writing them. So that's why I don't have that many of those, thankfully. And um, actually, I just finished a story that was kind of on the heavy side. It didn't have any of that kind of stuff in it, but it was just very, very emotional. And and I had to actually take a break from writing that because it was just so. I kept saying it was so emo, but yeah, I mean, it can be draining writing that kind of stuff. So I tend to have to step back from it and work on something a little more lighthearted.
What is your writing process like? Because I know you said you just have this story in your mind, you need to write it out, but how does your specific writing process look like?
Hmm. Well, like I get a story idea, and I try to and I have to jot it down. I'll put it in my phone or something because I do not have the memory to try to remember it. Um, and then if I really, because sometimes I get an idea and I think it's cute in the moment, but then once I deliberate a little more, I realize that's not gonna carry throughout a full book. Um, and I know, and I don't do many novellas or shorts or anything like that. I do have a series of shorts that I did, but for the most part, most of my stuff is full length novels. Um, so if I feel like it's a viable story that can sustain a full length book, then I'll begin like fleshing it out and thinking about the characters, and I'll work on an outline and all of that stuff, and that can take days or weeks or months depending on the story. I mean, I just finished the outline last week that I've had in my head for months and months. Um, and sometimes it takes longer than that. It really just depends on the story, um, but yeah. And then once I finally get the outline where I want it, then I begin writing the first draft. Um, and then after that, it's just revisions and tweaks and rewrites and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty basic as far as that.
Okay, so what kind of advice would you give a young author or someone who has written, who's trying to be an author or trying to make a career out of writing? It's not always an easy career to step into.
Yeah, it's writing itself is pretty easy to get into. Making a career out of it is the difficult thing. But that's another topic, I guess. But yeah, as far as just the writing part though, I would say, and this is what I tell people a lot when I get asked this, I say write what you want because um, there's so much dialogue or debate, I guess you could say now about what people should write, what they shouldn't write, how they should write it. what is appropriate, what is not. And, I turn my ears off to that because I've always been one to write the stories that I want. Um, because that's, if you try to cater to what's popular, then it's not authentic. It's not real. It's, you don't put as much of yourself into it. You might make a few bucks, but it's just not authentic, you know. And if I'm gonna have my name on something that's out there for people to get, in perpetuity, then I want it to be something I'm proud of, you know. Um, Regardless of how many people buy it, regardless of any of that, I have to be proud of whatever I put out there. So it's whatever I produce is going to be something that is going to be something that I wanted to write. I made the decision to do it, um, and it didn't go out until I was happy with it. So that's what I tell people. Um, get feedback, listen to opinions if you need to, but at the end of the day, if you write the story that you want to write and live with it, once it's out there, live with it. You know, if whether people love it or hate it, what matters is if you love it or not, and that's what I tell people.
That's some pretty good advice because everyone tries to fit into trends and what's
Yeah,
popping right now.
exactly.
So how, and now we can talk about the business of being an author and the business side and getting your work seen and, getting people to buy. How has that process now been for you besides now having to also write, self-publishing, and now being an author who has to run the business and make sure you sell?
It's a learning process still, even after all these years and all these books. You're still learning. I'm still learning the best practices for certain things. Um, I had a 9 to 5 for years up until last year when I unfortunately got laid off. So writing was more of a side thing. Now it's all I do because of that. Um, you know, Unless you, especially if you're self-published, it's even that more difficult to make your living at it. Um, just because I mean you're putting up all the money up front. You have to pay for everything from cover design. You have to pay for if you get editing and proofreadings and all of that. If you get beta readers, sometimes they charge you for that. Whatever avenue you use to publish it, you have to pay for that. All those upfront costs are coming out of your pocket. Whatever you need to pay for promotion. A lot of promotion is free. You don't have to pay for anything. But some, depending on some things, you do, have to put money up for that. And then there's also the stuff about having a separate business account for just those expenses and that income. It's a lot. It's a lot to learn, and I'm still learning. Because it wasn't up until somewhat fairly recently that I started looking at that because I was just focusing on I just want to write the books and that's it. I ain't really worried about much else. But it is a business and you have to look at it as such, even though that's not the sexy part of it, that's the real part of it. So definitely and definitely align if you don't know, definitely align yourself with an author that does. There's so many author forums, author groups, whatever that you can join that that will tell you all this stuff. And a lot of authors are very forthcoming when it comes to that kind of information. They'll gladly tell you what they do, or how they go about doing things. Like I said, I'm still learning myself. I certainly don't claim to know everything about that. But yeah, it's definitely something to be mindful of, and I wish I had known early on. But this has been definitely a learn as you go thing for me. So, but that's fine. I'm not mad at that.
A lot of authors are currently using social media as a push for their business. Have you also gotten into the social media space to get a new audience or reach a new audience for your books or a new generation of readers?
Oh, yeah, I use social media a good bit. I'm there's some days where I don't have much to say, and
Which is
when I don't
surprising
have,
for an author.
it's I tend to be very quiet most of the time, and I'm very very introverted. So it's like when I have those days where I just don't have it in me to try to be cute or clever or whatever. That's when I usually either repost stuff that I've already done, or I just don't say anything. You know, I don't try to. I'm not one that tries to be flooding anybody's timeline or be, I have to be on there all day, every day. I do have other things to do. So, but I do try to plan some content on Sundays. That's the day that I usually try to do that kind of stuff. And that is another ongoing learning process as far as content creation and all that. That's a whole other avenue in and of itself. Sometimes that's some people's whole jobs is to, come up with that kind of stuff. And, that's another part of this whole being an author thing is, promotion and marketing, you know. And it's not my favorite part. I'm just not going front about that. But, it just comes with it. And unless you're able to pay someone to do that for you, you just have to find time to do it. It doesn't have to be that difficult. I would say just choose one or two social media platforms to focus on, because there's so many, and there's always little new ones popping up. It'll be darn near impossible to try to be active on all of them and still be effective. So my main ones are Twitter and Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok.
Why the eye roll? You should be on TikTok. Book talk is really big right now.
it is, but that's another one of those things that's like it's popular. I get it, but I don't vibe well with TikTok. It's fine. I just posted some on there yesterday, so I can't say I'm not active. Yeah. I'm not as active as I am on Twitter and Instagram. It's so much work. You got to make the. I love Twitter because all you need is words. Right. You can post pictures, you can post other stuff, but all you need is words. And that's why I love Twitter so much. And it's just so much easier to, but yeah, TikTok is fine. I mean, I've actually, picked up some good tips from there as far as like, Canva hacks and other little tips and stuff, about that. But yeah, I'm way more active on, on Twitter and Instagram. It's just, those are the ones I vibe with personally. Nothing wrong with TikTok. Nothing wrong with, and the other ones. But yeah, those are my main two. Because I don't have the energy of the time to try to be on all of these, all the time. It's just not feasible.
Yeah. And it's just not your thing. You should be writing.
Right, I mean, I have to write these books,
You have to write these books, not post these videos or whatever.
Right. It takes time to do that. Like the one I posted yesterday on Twitter, I love how it turned out, but oh my gosh, like I'm not a videographer or editor or whatever. I had to film that and edit it and all this. I can do that. I can't do that every day. No.
I understand. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jessica, exactly. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm just so honored to have you on this platform of mine, and I wish you so well. I'm definitely going to get your book, one of them or two of them. I'm an avid reader, so I'm completely excited to start reading.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.